let's talk about Barstool Sports. So I don't know whether you've heard, but Dave Portnoy, has recently bought back Barstool Sports for $1. Now, it's pretty impressive. He originally sold this going back probably about between 5 and 10 years ago. I think it was like now I'm mixed up with all my numbers and everything. But he sold it for about $500 million and then has recently bought it back for $1. Now, you're wondering, what's this got to do with hiring and firing? Well, it's really interesting that Dave Portnoy was built up Barstool Sports, which is pretty much just a media company, right? They do a bunch of other things as well, like some sports management things as well for college students. But he built up this media agency, sold it to Penn Entertainment, which is a gambling organization, and then recently Penn wanted to do a deal with ESPN, and there's no one's admitting it, but pretty much they assume that ESPN said, we don't want Barstool Sports to be a part of the deal, because Dave Portnoy says, when it comes to what they do, they don't want to filter on themselves, because they are a media agency, they're YouTubers, and so they like to be able to be free and to say and do whatever they want. And with a gambling company, there's a lot of regulations and everything like that. So there's a lot of challenges that they face, with them being involved, and ESPN didn't want that to go ahead with the deal. And so he bought the company back for $1. Now, you're probably thinking, what's that got to do with hiring and firing, which is what we're going to be talking about today? Well, he kind of was hired. He was fired originally, and now he's rehired, I suppose, as the boss now. But the interesting thing, after this event, he went back into his offices, and we saw this on Twitter. And let me get my screen back up there. On the day after this announcement, he posted this on Twitter. Now, I'm not going to post the sound, but this is him showing a video of his offices. Okay, so I don't know why that's not playing, but you can see that his offices are empty. And he scans around, and a bunch of employees didn't turn up to work. So it's really interesting, and he goes through this whole thing of like, well, if they don't want their jobs and blah blah blah, like all this sort of stuff. But now, part of me does consider possibly, they're a media agency and they're all about their, playing jokes and stuff like that. So who knows whether this was part of them just trolling or whatever, or maybe that was an empty part of the office that's a traveling team and that team are away right now or something. Who knows, right? But let's take it on that consideration that, Dr. Rod, when you take over a company and the next day you turn up, and he said that this was kind of like it was posted at 9:54 a.m. So almost 10 o'clock. If you turn up after purchasing a company, now, okay, you buy it for $1, so maybe it's on the theory of you pay peanuts and get monkeys, right? So maybe it's that. But what's your take if you turn up the next day and half the office is empty and people didn't turn up?
Well, I think once I got over the insult that nobody turned up for me, I'd start wondering about the culture. What is going on here? What are we doing paying people for not being at work? Yeah. And I know that lots and lots of people got used to working from home, and I know that there are many jobs where it's actually possible to work from home most, maybe even all of the time. Mm-hmm. But to turn up to an office where you've got desks, you've got chairs, which are obviously designed to have people at them, and they're not there, I really do think I'd have to go first to culture and ask So what is it about the culture of this place that leads people to think that on my first day, they don't need to turn up on time?
Yes, and actually you hit on a good point, because I'm not going to substantiate any of the claims because I don't know anything. We don't know the real stories, but I've heard rumors that he's not the easiest person to work for, and maybe this is people going, oh, if he bought the company again, I don't want to be a part of it, or whatever, like, so it goes back to culture, and it shows that I think for this is the thing that I wanted to bring up was, you're spot on, the culture. If we're hiring and firing, we can hire and fire as many people as we want, but if the company has bad culture, the staff are never going to perform. Or they might, but they might for a season, and then their performance will drop off, or they might just be, negative, whatever the culture is that you're setting. So before hiring, this is one thing that I do with my clients, is I make sure that when we hire, before we hire, it's like, what are your core values? Because when you hire someone, you need to show those people what those core values are to make sure their values align with that, or that at least they can operate within those values. What's your take on then the culture and how would you play this out? Okay, you come up, what's the culture like? You've just bought this organization. Obviously, the culture may not be that good. Are we straight away doing, like Elon Musk that we spoke about a few months ago? Are we just going in and just clearing everyone out and just firing everyone? Or what should we do in this situation?
Look, I don't think so, because you can't be sure why it is that any individual is not there. First, I wouldn't have been insulting about the staff who weren't there, because you read his Twitter post. I suppose it's an X post now, but
yes,
it was quite insulting of employees. All right,
Mm-hmm.
so that I wouldn't have done that as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, I think I probably would have
Which
got a
goes
message.
back to your concept of culture, which I think
absolutely, it's all part of culture.
There was a whole bunch of things that actually went down there that he was just ripping on people, and that does seem to be the culture. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, well, that's not a good way to start. But I think I would have also tried to get out of communication before start of work to say, hey, look, this is what's happened.
Yeah,
I'll be in my office at 9 a.m. or 8 a.m. or whatever, and we'll get together. We're going to have a meeting at 9:15 or something like that. So give people a reason to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't use a social media account in any case to deal with an issue like this. I'd keep it in-house if I could.
And I think that is actually the challenge with this social media culture we're in. Like this is, let's be honest, this is the world we're in now. Everything's online. Everything's being live streamed. Everything's being tweeted or X'd or whatever they want to call it now. But everyone's like, whatever their thoughts are just being put out, unfiltered thoughts going out, and that's kind of like the environment that we live in. How do you still manage being able to manage your team but still live in this environment, which is obviously they're a media agency. They should be like, that's the whole point. That's what they should do. And they are that kind of frat boy kind of culture of mucking around and all that sort of stuff. So I suppose my question is they're a media agency. They should be putting everything online. That's kind of what they do. They're a sporting agency, which is kind of a frat boy thing. And we say that's bad culture, but it's kind of who they are and what they do. How do you draw the line between this is who we are and bad culture? Because we there has to be a space for people to, so to speak, boys to be boys and all that sort of stuff. And it's quite obvious that this organization, that's what they gear themselves towards. Where does that culture cross the line into being bad culture then?
Oh, well, look, first, you used the expression, this is how we are, and then moved on to talk about culture. Well, culture is who we are, right?
Yes.
So that if you want to know what the culture of a place is, find out what people think they are. Who do you think you are, so to speak? Now, the other thing I would say is this, and this is a general principle in business. We're in business because we're solving somebody's problem.
Yes.
Now, the problem that we might be solving as a media production company is people want to be entertained, people want to be informed, and some people like being informed in an entertaining way.
Yes.
And that's great. Now, that's what needs to be the focus. And I think one of the things that can sometimes happen in media is that we begin focusing on ourselves. We want to know how many people watched me, how many favourable comments about me were made. I think that's the wrong question, really, because the right question is, whose problem did we solve today? Or how many people's problems did we solve today? Because people will only keep watching, they'll only keep buying if you keep on solving their problem. Theologically, I put it this way, the purpose of business, any business, regardless of what kind of business it is, it must be positively contributing to human flourishing in some sense. Because if it doesn't, it's not going to succeed. So, and to succeed, I think you do have to have a culture within an organisation that says the people here actually matter. So I don't really see much value in insulting your people. And I don't see much value in letting people discover what your own values and principles are rather than you being upfront about it.
Yeah, that's good.
So, for example, if there is a culture that says, look, we can work from home on Mondays and Fridays if we want, or whatever, that's okay. But let's address that directly rather than let your people find out by experience that, well, actually, this is not the culture that I want to develop here anymore. Communicate it in words rather than let people experience the change.
So how would you, before getting into the hiring and firing, because I mean, let's take this for what it is. It is a boss that's upset that people haven't turned up to work on the first day, pretty much, right? And so let's take all the other stuff out of it. There might be their culture. It might be it might just be the way they are. It might be media agents. They may just be blowing this up. This might just be for views, let's take all that out of it. Let's imagine you did turn up and you go, okay, the culture here is not right. What's the process you take to make sure you shift that culture, and how long do you give people to kind of get in rhythm with the new culture?
Look, that can be quite difficult. They say culture comes from the top, and it does, but it's also something that doesn't really change overnight. And if a culture has developed, as has been the case in many organisations now since COVID, where people feel now that it is their right to work from home. And look, I think there's an extent to which that is a good thing, and it can actually improve productivity. But I think this is about flexibility, not about rights. It's about developing a kind of flexibility that works well for both the employer and the employee. I think the other thing we need to keep in mind as employees is that's what we are. The firm doesn't exist to do everything we want it to do. Or it doesn't exist to pander to our own preferences all the time. Where it is possible to do that in a way which is flexible, but which doesn't actually undermine the vision, the strategy, and the operational plans of the organisation, that's great. I'm all for flexibility. But at the end of the day, that flexibility shouldn't be compromising the mission of the organisation.
I agree. I think that
just while you're thinking,
go.
Your fundamental approach to leadership is about being on purpose, right? Exactly the same applies to an organisation. The
Yeah.
fundamental cultural value within an organisation has to be, we're on purpose. Our purpose is defined by our mission. We are always focused on our mission.
Yeah, that's spot on. And I think that the lesson we can take from this situation is the fact that, look, before, if we were unhappy with our employees, if we walk into an office and it's empty and we're unhappy with our employees' situation, their performance or whatever, I don't think there's a place where we go straight into an instant berating, especially a public berating. We need to step back and go, what's the culture that I've set as the leader? Before you can fire someone, before you go through performance management, it's like, have I set the right culture? And am I making sure that the values of this organization are clear and understood? And then I can help my team work through their journey of aligning themselves with those values. And usually when you do that process, you'll find that people will self-deselect, right? You won't necessarily have to fire someone when you're so clear on your values and you're working them through them and they know that they can't or don't want to align with those values, they will self-deselect. And so sometimes that might save you with the firing, because if you're just clear on your values and people know that they can't live up to them, they will check themselves out. Hey, you've just watched an excerpt from the On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If it challenged your leadership or inspired you in some way, put a comment below. And if you want to watch the full episode or more content like this, check out our channel. And hey, consider subscribing while you're there.